This is the School of Astrology, and we're back with the astrological calendar for February 2021. So why do we look at astrological calendars and forecasts? The question that lies behind that is, what is time quality? Time quality is basically what you get if you look up into the sky, or basically if you consider the qualities of the constellation of a day as such, and in terms of what it means for you. The time quality is the type of energy that prevails at a time. Basically, that's more or less the same all over the world. But of course, depending on your own birth chart, this will relate to you differently than it would relate to another person. So some people may be affected more strongly by a constellation than others, and differently than others. So the question is, why is this? In your birth chart, you have specific constellations, like say a square of Moon and Saturn. So the Moon will be depressed by the quality of Saturn because the square is a tangent aspect. And so this would generate certain experiences for you, good or bad, challenging, and may make you stronger, or you may have suffered. But this type of constellation in your chart will be relevant to how you experience future events. So whenever there is a similar constellation between Moon and Saturn, you will again feel this, and you will feel this more than someone who doesn't have this experience based on their own charts. So this is basically why we would relate to similar aspects in the current events more than others, if certain constellations repeat that we know, that we feel we know. So this is also how we would like you to use these types of tables that we share. They are called ephemeris. And you don't need to wait for us to publish the ephemeris of the next month. With the keyword ephemeris, you get a lot of free resources online for desktop and on apps. So that's not a problem. You can look that up anytime online and relate the constellation of a day to your chart. And so what you want to look for is all kinds of similar aspects. So if we go back to the Saturn square Moon constellation that you may have in your own chart, so you will check, especially for Saturn, and whether Saturn in the current ephemeris forms any kind of aspect to your birth chart. And here comes the deal that is hardly ever noted in interpretations, is that also all kinds of other aspects that Saturn forms now to your Moon will feel like the aspect that you have in your chart. So even if Saturn forms a trine to your Moon, the current Saturn, the transiting Saturn, forms a trine to your Moon, even though you have a square in your own chart, you will still feel the trine more as a square than as a trine, right? Because this is the type of experience you have, and we tend to respond to current events with what we know and not with what it is. So basically, here's also the learning that you can anticipate constellations like this and try to go with the current quality and transcend it. Like find out maybe how you can let go of previous experiences and shape what you receive from this constellation. And this is what we also call framing. So it's up to you to frame what this constellation will do for you. You can frame it like Saturn will depress my energies and my emotions, and so be it. You can also decide to experience this constellation as something that makes you clearer and more aware and more disciplined, because this constellation can do a lot of things. And we choose in our own programming, in our first and early experiences, how you would feel. But later on in life, you can always choose to change this. So this is basically why we have astrology as a guide to first find out what are the underlying issues and where they may come from, to then be able to shape the experience in such a way that they serve us best. Right? So you can do this as a child, but you can opt to do this later on as an adult. And this way, astrology can become a tool for introspection, for reflection, and for the realization that you need to shape your life in such a way that you're happier with it, or that you can use your talents to the fullest. Right? So that's always a type of framing. How do you go about an aspect? So none of the aspects are sacrosanct. They're merely an indication, and it's up to us to take them and deliberately shape the experience that we want to get out of this type of energy, because in general, every aspect has two ways to be lived. You can decide to suffer from them and to repeat the suffering, or you can one day decide to step out of it and find out what is the alternative interpretation that such an aspect has, and then train yourself, your emotions, and your body to live through the newly framed experience. So it's a training, because the first training that you had in living this aspect was also mere training. In the beginning of a life, we have experiences, and then they become ingrained in our brain and body. And we then keep repeating those interpretations. But it's interpretations. It's not sacrosanct. You can change the interpretation, especially as an adult, and decide to interpret this type of experience differently and let go of the old interpretation, so it may not further haunt you. Okay? So here's now an ephemeris table of February 2021 with all the planetary placements for the month of February. You also see with, for instance, Mercury, that there is an RX for retrograde and then a D for directive. So it's becoming prograde again. On the day where you find this D in the table, the degree will tell you when Mercury is going to turn around, and the D will be on the day where this happens, right? So this is how you read these tables. This is just one type of display, so you will find several types of designs. They're all good. So the most ideal is that you find the ones that appeal to your eye, that you can read the best, and that you feel the most comfortable with. The one that we show here is not too much detail, because you will just see a starting point and an end point. The typical ephemeris would give you the exact degrees for every day, sometimes a half a day for the sun or for the moon. So this is very practical if you want to just briefly look up the constellations and check, for instance, when a certain planet will be in a degree that is relevant for you in relation to your chart or to the chart that you would like to analyze. Okay? So then what we've also done is to check specific day qualities that will be relevant in the course of February, because they may interfere stronger than others or have a very specific quality that is difficult to escape, or that you would maybe like to mind if you start something new, like you start a project. You may possibly not wish to pick a day where there is like an angry energy or dispute in the type of day constellation. So you may wish to then maybe wait a day or even sometimes 2 weeks, like especially with the example that we have here on the screen already. Mercury will be in retrograde from 31st January to 21st February. So what does this tell us? Especially the days before already, because Mercury will slow down as from the perspective of the Earth, not in general, of course, not in the sky. So that's an astronomical term for the visibility that we have toward a planet. So the planet itself, of course, doesn't turn around. So what does it mean when Mercury is in retrograde? Is that typically even a few days before and a few days after Mercury will be very slow, and in retrograde, things will seem to be more cumbersome and slower, especially slower than we typically used to, or that we would appreciate things to go. Typically, we would appreciate things to go in a flow. And with a Mercury in retrograde, things will take longer, sometimes ages to complete. Things will be complicated, and there will be misunderstandings and maybe errors, and we'll have to do things again and read it over. And it will take longer to complete than at times when Mercury is in prograde motion. All right? So Mercury in retrograde is especially great for all things where you would like to take your time to put things together and prepare. And then after the retrograde motion, you're set to start, right? So that's a very good time for preparation and for reflective thoughts and for reconsidering things and looking at it in much more detail, for researching, putting stuff together. And then when you're done, you look at it with fresh eyes. When Mercury has become prograde again, you may wish to wait a few days for it to pick up speed, because the speed will prevail throughout the project that you start then. So Mercury is a very important factor to consider if you want to start something like start a business or start a project. It depends very much on the quality of Mercury at the moment that you start it, whether it will go smooth and quick and easy, or whether it will be slow, right? So now that was Mercury, our first example for February. So there's quite a long time in February to wait. So if you want to start things before that, you may wish to rush and do that well before the 31st January, or then well after the 21st, like from the 24th, 25th February onwards, right? So the beginning of February is intense, and from the 1st and 2nd February, we also have a very interesting constellation. There's a stellium of 5 planets in Aquarius, because later on the 1st of February, Venus will enter Aquarius to then make it 5 planets in Aquarius, which is typically a very fast-paced type of energy. If you have so many planets, in this case here, Mercury, the Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus in Aquarius. So this would typically be a very fast-paced type of energy. But as we just said, Mercury will slow this down a bit, because Mercury in retrograde motion will slow things down overall. So it may not be that much fast-paced, but still very innovative and a pro-society condition, because Aquarius is the sign of everything that is for the people and for society. So there may be a lot of good ideas around, but due to the condition of Mercury, you may wish to wait a bit and evaluate those ideas a little longer than you would typically consider to do it, right? So here you have those 5 buggers here. Now on 6 February, we have 3 constellations that we would like to mind possibly. The first is a conjunct of Venus and Saturn, something that would rather reduce enjoyment and passion, but also stabilize love, depends on which angle you view it. Then we have a square between Mars and Sun, which is typically rather unfriendly, possibly also aggressive. Also depends on your own constellation, of course, whether you would feel that or not, or whether you would witness it with others, and maybe you're not affected, but others will be around you. And then we have a square between Venus and Uranus, which would be, it's called the typical divorce aspect, but of course not every time Venus has a square to Uranus there will be divorces, because they are all the time, and the constellation also is not the only one that would be for a breakup. But in this case, with Saturn and Venus in conjunct, and Venus at the same time having a square to Uranus, this is possibly not the day that you would like to pick to get married, for instance. Maybe not so ideal. So this is what we're saying with this type of interpretation for the day quality. The 6th of February may display qualities that you may wish to avoid if projects are supposed to run smoothly, right? And then we see from the 21st of February a stellium of 4 in Aquarius, because the Sun, meanwhile, will have left Aquarius and is now already in Pisces. And at the same time, we also see that Saturn on February 21st runs into a square with Uranus, and this condition will last until the 28th of February. So this will make innovation a little more difficult, because Saturn will be an inhibition and Uranus will want to innovate, and the squares as a tangent aspect will reduce the possibility of innovation and implementation. And on the other hand, Uranus will rebel against the restriction of Saturn, because again, the square is a tangent aspect. Right? So with all kinds of implementation, you may wish to wait until after this aspect. So probably March will be your time to start a project, right? Okay, so that was it. Here's again your table. You may wish to screenshot this one. So you can always look it up or just find another source that appeals more to the eye, because we agree that our table is not overly pretty. It's just supposed to be practical. Okay? All right, we hope you find useful content in this video and on this channel, and appreciate your feedback. Thanks for your comments. Please also comment what interests you. We will try to cater to the most requested themes first. Please subscribe also to stay updated with free content every Sunday, and remember to activate notifications to be informed about new content. Thank you for your interest, and see you again soon on this channel.